What's up, everyone? Welcome to Mets Off Day Live, presented by Planet Fitness. Join Planet Fitness for $1 down on the Classic membership. The deal ends September 12th. I'm your host, Chelsea Sherrod, and joining me are the host of the Mets pod, Joe DeMayo, and Mets play-by-play broadcaster, Keith Raad. Guys, how you doing?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
Good to see you, Chelsea, as always. And Joe, you always look shiny bright over there.
Perfect.
Joe, we're very happy to see you smiling for this show. I know you mentioned on X that you looked much happier to be here than in that picture that we used, so thank you for being here. Guys, all right, let's get started. We're going to go around the diamond. The Mets are riding a 7-game win streak after winning 2 out of 3 from the Diamondbacks and sweeping the White Sox and the Red Sox. Keith, I'll start with you. What is your biggest takeaway from the team's winning streak?
Yeah, right now I think it's a lot of confidence, and that's what you need at this point, something that may not be so physical when you get into September. This is it. This is the home stretch for everybody, and the best teams that do the best in the postseason are the ones that finish strong. And I think win after win for the Mets, even though it felt like the road trip, they could have went 9-1. They actually went 7-3. I think the confidence that they had coming out of Arizona, sweeping the White Sox, very un-Mets to sweep the worst team ever, right? They should have lost at least one game, but they didn't. And that's because I think right now they're trying to peak at the right time, and a lot of that has to do with confidence. Everybody's exhausted, everybody's wiped mentally, but I think they're playing well and they're using that energy.
Yeah. Joe, what do you think?
So I'm even going to take it bigger picture. And it's just the resolve that this team has shown throughout the season. They started 0-5. They were 11 games under 500 at one point. And I tweeted this last night. They entered June 12th with a 28-37 record. That's obviously 9 games under 500. Since then, they've gone 48-27, 21 games over 500, a 640 winning percentage. And then obviously if you bring it to very recently, the resolve that they showed after that game in Arizona where Corbin Carroll hit the grand slam to win the game for the Diamondbacks, that just felt like one of those gut punch losses that is going to set a negative motion for the rest of the season. But they got right back on the horse and, took care of business in Chicago, as Keith said. And then obviously here with the Red Sox swept them as well. So, just great resolve, and that's a credit to Carlos Mendoza. That's a credit to the players on this team that despite tough losses and, tough situations, they've been able to bounce back.
Yeah, you can tell that they've got something really going well in the clubhouse. You mentioned confidence, Keith. Has the past 2 weeks given the Mets the confidence boost that they need as a team or as they head down the stretch of the rest of the season?
Yeah, and as they've gotten to this point where they've taken some of those gut punches that we felt, that San Diego game, the finale, you could have taken 3 out of 4. You give up the walk-off to Jackson Maryland, as Joe pointed out, that Corbin Carroll home run. Those were the gut punches that basically were May 1st to the end of May. The Mets went through one of the worst months probably in franchise history. And so now you can tell that when they do get punched in the gut, they do have that resolve. So it's almost as if May was a blessing in disguise, as ugly as it felt. There were times you'd show up and go, how are the Mets going to lose today? But even when that happens for a split second or for maybe 2 days in a row, the Mets kind of come out of that. And that's what I mean about this last push, this last peak. They have been hit already. They've been down. They're up. And if they get down, they're not down for too long. And that's what you need right now in this home stretch.
Yeah, Joe, what do you think about where the Mets are as far as their confidence is as they go through the rest of the regular season?
I mean, it has to be high. They're playing great baseball. You see the stats here right below us with the record and the ERA. And if you go back to June, they have the best starting pitching ERA in the sport. So this is a team that's been riding hot for not just the last few days, but riding hot for the past couple months. So that's where I look at it as the team can say, we're a legitimately good baseball team. We're a legitimate playoff contender. We're not just a team that's having a hot little stretch. The Mets are legitimate. And, I hope people are actually realizing that now.
Yeah, you mentioned the starting pitching. And like you said, the Mets have had some of the best starting pitching in the past month. Keith, how have the starting pitchers been able to make such a turnaround from earlier in the season when they struggled to even get through 6 innings?
Yeah, it definitely was frustrating in the beginning of the year, but I think you saw from guys like Sean Manaea, you could see in the 4 or 5 innings he would last early in the year. You're going, man, if he could only stretch this out a little further. But you know what? The Mets actually, I think, did this by design. You can see if you look at Manaya's just simply his game logs. Follow his whole summer. He's going 5, all of a sudden 6, and now it seems every time out he's giving you 7, and it feels like, maybe the Mets had something here with not only Manaya but David Peterson and of course Luis Severino, building these guys up toward the end of the year. I mean, Severino said it the other day. He would, if you told him in spring training he was going to throw 150 innings, he would have never believed you. But the way the Mets front office training staff handled this, they're able to bottle up what these guys do really well and little by little get more and more out of them as the year goes on. So now that they're in September, I mean, Manaya's as hot as he's been. Severino feels like he's as hot as he's been. David Peterson is as hot as he's been. You'd rather have that in September than anywhere else during the year. So however they did it, it's worked.
Yeah, they've made a complete 180. Joe, who for you, though, has surprised you the most on the Mets pitching staff?
I think it has to be Sean Manaea. He's a guy that throughout his career has always flashed. And at times, Sean Manaea looked like, all right, this is the year he's going to break out. And this is the year that Sean Manaea has broke out. And if you look back over his last 13 starts, he has a 2.61 ERA. Batters are hitting 181 against him, and he has 81 strikeouts and 79 in the third innings. And importantly, the team is at 11-2 in games that he started in that stretch. So, Sean Manaea, a flyer signing of sorts with the 2-year deal with the opt-out, kind of that 1 year, see if he could rebuild his value. And I think it's fair to say Sean Manaea has rebuilt his value, and he's trending in the direction of a nice payday this coming off season. But we're still on September 5th. We'll worry about that then. Let's just keep that train going for the next month or hopefully 2.
Yeah, and for sure. And as good as the Mets starting pitching has been, they could still get Kodai Senga back, and he's closer to returning than most people expected a few weeks ago. Initially, Senga mentioned he might be available out of the bullpen if the Mets made the playoffs, but now there's a possibility of him starting a game in September. So, Keith, what do you envision Senga's role being if the Mets continue making a run at the postseason?
Yeah, I think Kodai Senga is actually further along, as Andy Martino reported, and most of us found out just a couple of days ago at Citi Field when Senga sat down in the dugout and said that he's feeling good, he's throwing, he's starting to get into a bullpen, and he feels like by the end of the year, I think he wants to make one regular season start at the very end just to feel good about himself and show that he can do it. But we know him. We know what he's about, especially this year with the injury. He was very slow to get on a mound. He needed to feel 100%. And I think that this injury that he sustained in that outing against Atlanta kind of showed him, okay, this is what you can do. You feel good. He shoved that night before he got hurt. Now he gets hurt again, and he's slowly coming back. I think he's going to maybe give the Mets a Kodai Senga at 75 or 80%, which would be nice. You can get him to start. You can have him come out of the bullpen. But if he does start, I do wonder about that because he's a once-a-week guy. And in the playoffs, you might be playing a lot of games in a short amount of time. You might not get Senga for a lot of starts. I wonder how he does with that. And maybe with that in mind, he does become a bullpen piece. But he's such a juicy thought as a starting pitcher, as a surprise for potentially October.
Yeah. Joe, how cautious do you think that the Mets should be with Senga coming off of 2 injuries in all of the season minus 1 start?
I mean, I don't think Kodai Senga is going to come and make that start, and they're going to push him to 110 pitches and see how deep he could go into the game.
Right.
I think the idea of Senga being, in a way, almost like minor league baseball in a way, right, where he can start the game. He could go 3 innings, he could go 4 innings, and then you can piggyback him with, we'll talk about the playoffs in a second if the Mets are to make it there, but you could piggyback with a long reliever of sorts. And to Keith's point about the way Senga with the rest in between starts, I wonder how much he'd be able to pitch out of the bullpen. Like if he throws an inning out of the bullpen, how many days does he need to sit before he could throw another inning? So that's kind of the unpredictable nature of what is going on with Kodai Senga right now. But I think you bring him back, you start him, and it might be one of those things where he's starting more of an abbreviated game rather than a, full regular start like we've seen from Manaea and Peterson and Severino over the last couple of months.
Yeah, Joe, quick follow-up. If the Mets make the wild card and play a best-of-3 playoff series, who would be your rotation then for that series?
Kodai Senga, piggybacked by David Peterson, Sean Manaea, and Luis Severino. And I'll tell you, if you told me that in spring training, I'd be like, that's okay. But the way those guys are pitching, that's probably one of the best playoff rotations that are going to be in the wild card round if the Mets are to be there.
Yeah. What do you think, Keith?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'd probably lean Minaya in game 1 of any series because I want him to bounce back quickly for game 4 if you do make it past, of course, the three-game wild card series. Severino in game 2, you just love his moxie and you love his experience there. And then, I mean, listen, if you can get Kodai Senga, David Peterson, a piggyback, that would be a minor league, become a major league dream there, Joe, to get both of those guys on the mound in the same game. But I think David Peterson's earned it. You know, another guy that would be in the mix would be a Jose Quintana. It doesn't seem like Quintana, because of that home run ball that's really snake bit him this year, is the guy you want on the mound in a big playoff game. Home run could really change things. David Peterson would earn that 3 spot for me. And I like that. It's not a 3-headed monster, but if you follow the Mets, it is become a 3-headed monster. If you're looking nationally, these aren't huge names, but they're guys that have been just pitching really well at the end of the year.
Yeah, and this, like you said, Keith, this is the perfect time for them to be doing that. All right, let's switch gears a little bit to talk about Francisco Lindor, who has been getting MVP chants, signs, everything made for him lately. He's had 16 multi-hit games in his last 31 games played. MVP talks are really starting to pick up in his favor, obviously, despite Shohei Ohtani being the clear front runner. Keith, if Lindor keeps up this pace, do you think there's a chance he wins the NL MVP?
I do. I'm a believer in Fangraphs. I'm a believer in WAR. I know that it's a statistic that the old school fan doesn't really care about, but all of a sudden they see graphics where Lindor's WAR is better than Ohtani's, and all of a sudden we've now banded the old school and the new school together, and everyone's going, yeah, Lindor should win it. But, you know, as much as Shohei Ohtani is an absolute monster and deserves his flowers every single year, the one year where he's just a DH and not a pitcher is the year to look and see, okay, who has been the best player in the National League? Francisco Lindor has been the best player in the National League. He has a better WAR right now than Shohei Ohtani does. But really what the difference has been for Lindor is if you can pull up WAR from when Lindor went to the leadoff spot on May 18th, he almost has double the amount of wins above replacement that Ohtani does. So Ohtani really had a great beginning of the year. Lindor is having a great midseason to September finish. If he gets the Mets to the playoffs, to me, I know the Vegas odds are one thing. I think Lindor is your NL MVP.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that just the way that he's been playing just shows another side of his leadership and the way that he's been able to lead the Mets on the incredible run that they're on. Joe, in your recent memory, or in your memory as a whole, has any Mets position player had a season as good as this one?
Yeah, I think recency bias is going to say this is the greatest season of a Mets position player ever. And, you know, by WAR, it may end up being the case, but there's a couple other that we want to bring up here. David Wright, 2007, he hit 325, 416 on base, 546 slugging. That's a 962 OPS with 30 home runs, 34 stolen bases, won a Gold Glove. Carlos Beltran in 06, 982 OPS, 41 home runs, only 18 steals, Gold Glove in center field. But the fact that we're talking about those incredible seasons during obviously one really good Mets season and one good for everything except the last 17 games, Francisco Lindor is in the conversation with those guys. And, I say this on Twitter every so often or X, that Mets fans just realize how lucky you are to be able to watch Francisco Lindor play every single day. And we say that often about, position players, they play every day, but Lindor literally plays every day. So whether it's the best season for a Mets position player ever or not, it's close, but I mean, amazing season that has him in the conversation, the MVP conversation with a player like Shohei Ohtani. And I said this on the Mets pod that whether Lindor wins the award or comes up second, the fact that we are mentioning his name in the same breath as Shohei Ohtani shows how special this season is.
Absolutely. And Keith, you spend a lot of time at Citi Field. You hear Mets fans cheering for Lindor, giving out the MVP chants for him every time he steps up to the plate. Does it feel like it's a playoff atmosphere at Citi Field right now?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the Mets just swept the Boston Red Sox is always a nice feeling. I remember Howie was saying on the air, it would have been a lot easier in 86 if the Mets had just swept the Red Sox like they did this week. Of course, when they won the World Series in 86. But the feeling right now is the Mets fans that are there, this is a playoff atmosphere. And the month of August, I mean, I was with them. The Mets were on the road for 19 games. There were only 9 home games. and it didn't go great for the Mets in mid-August. But now in September, you can feel it. The flags are blowing in the wind. It's getting a little chillier. The games mean more and more. The MVP chants are coming up for Lindor. Last night, fans were singing his walk-up song, which is My Girl by the Temptations. It's got that feel right now for Lindor. He's playing insanely well. My plea, though, to Mets fans is get out there. There's a big crowd on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I know everyone's getting back to school. You got to show up this weekend when the Mets continue this homestand. But it's getting to be that playoff atmosphere.
His walk-up song is one of my favorite things about him. I can't lie, guys. Joe, you're way more active on Twitter or X during the games. It's been a very up and down year, and Mets fans can be very reactionary at times. We all know this. How is the current morale of fans online right now?
Reactionary Mets Twitter? You don't say. I would say very often it is. I'll give this to Mets fans. They are passionate, win, lose, doesn't matter, but they ride the wave that the Mets are doing. If the Mets are playing well, I magically see all these nice, positive, tweets or posts or whatever they're called now. And if they lose 2 games in a row, then the season is over and they tried. Better luck next year. So right now things are going well. So Mets Twitter is a nice place to be. But if they, lose a couple games, I'll try to put it down for a minute.
They wear their hearts on their sleeves. And you know what?
Do.
I really
There's
can't
no
be mad
question.
at them for that. I really can't. All right, guys. It's time now for our viral moment as we bring in our social media king, Mr. Matt Spenley. Matt, what's up? What do you got?
What's up, guys? How we doing?
Great.
Matthew.
What's
Beautiful day. Joe, I would really like to talk smack about the football season since we're on the precipice, but I think we're pretty confident that your Cowboys are going to be better than my Giants this year. So I think I'll leave smack to everybody else.
God. Terrible.
All right, so I want to talk Jesse Winker because we know he's had a great arc as a Met, a villain to a hero. I'm pretty sure I was working the games in 2019 when he was with the Reds, did his waving. To watch him hit a grand slam yesterday, wave to the crowd, wave to his family, has his daughter in the field. It's been an awesome road. 306 as a Met. So, Keith, going to start with you. What have you thought about Winker so far as a New York Met?
Well, I love Jesse Winker. I put this out on Twitter once he came over in a trade with the Mets. I've known Jesse Winker since he was a Dayton Dragon in the Cincinnati Reds system 11 years ago. He's an all-around good dude, but what I saw there is what I see now, just a good hitter. And I think that's what Jesse Winker at his healthiest can do, is help a team like he is right now. Beginning of his career in Cincinnati, he was going to be one of the better hitters in baseball. Then he got hurt, went to Seattle, didn't really find it. Last year in Milwaukee, he was super clutch, just hurt. This year, he's healthy. This year, he was a Washington National, kind of rebuilt his reputation. And the Mets said, yes, please, thank you, we'll take you, Jesse Winker. He's a great complimentary piece. I mean, this celebration he had was one of the coolest moments I'd ever seen. You want to talk about playoff atmosphere? That was it when Jesse Winker hit that home run, hair waving. He's jacked up to be here. The Mets are winning. He's playing well. He's a vibes guy. Nothing better right now than having Jesse Winker in that clubhouse.
And he's talked about how much being a Met has meant to him, and he's given the fans their props, which I think has really endeared him too. So, Joe, I'm going to read you the top Instagram post from our post about him hitting his grand slam yesterday. I've seen enough 10 years, 10 billion, statue next to Seaver and his number in the rafters in left field. So are you signing Jesse Winker to a 10-year, $10 billion deal this offseason?
I feel like I could get him at a better value, and I will pursue that. But Jesse Winker is probably the least villainous villain in Mets history. It was all in fun at the time, and just didn't work out in the Mets' favor. So Mets fans were against it. But he's been very open, not just since joining the Mets, but prior to joining the Mets, that he loved having fun with the Mets fans, and obviously he's a New York native, so. Jesse Winker, perfect fit in this clubhouse, and I think a perfect fit for a team right now with the way they balance Starling Marte and JD Martinez's playing time. It's perfect to have Jesse Winker here.
And he'll play a big role down the stretch as the Mets look to make their postseason push. So thank you guys. Chelsea, back to you.
All right, Matt, appreciate you. Thank you so much for stopping in. All right, guys, let's switch things over to quick hitters. So Pete Alonso has regained some power in the past week, but he still doesn't look like himself, even breaking the bat over his leg after striking out 3 times in last night's game. I'm sure everyone saw that. Keith, do the Mets need Alonso to get hot in the final 20 games for the team to make the playoffs?
I mean, they would welcome it with open arms. And I think Pete wants to walk into that role pretty quick. And I know right now Lindor is carrying the team, but really, Nimmo is struggling a little bit. We'll talk about Francisco Alvarez struggling a little bit. I know the supplementary pieces have been helpful, but Pete is the Mets' power. He is the Mets' intimidation factor and fear factor. The nice thing about him is that when he's going to be playing some of these teams like the Phillies, like the Braves, and then into the playoffs, you have to worry about Alonso, whether he's going to hit 40 or he's going to hit 36 home runs this year. And that fear factor intimidation, I think the league still truly respects. They'll treat him as such, and you want that as a hitter. You want that fear factor. The home run he hit the other night, the pile-on home run against Boston, you could see he knew he had it. He knew he hit that big home run. He stared at it for a while. It was good to see for Pete. It's been a struggle year, but you could always push it late September. The Mets would love for him to finish out with something close to 40 home runs.
Yeah, Joe, Keith just said it. Pete is the Mets' power. We all know that. But if the Mets don't reach a long-term deal with Alonso in the offseason, are there any prospects who could potentially fill his gap?
Well, first off, I know it's a thing. Mets fans are kind of pushing Pete Alonso out the door because he hasn't hit with runners in scoring position this year. I would be a little reluctant to do that. But in the case that he gets the bag somewhere else, I think the easy move is you just slide Mark Vientos over from third base to first base, where I think he'd probably profile a little better defensively. But to stay on the train of prospects, and it wouldn't be a opening day type of replacement, but Ryan Clifford is a guy that he's played a little bit of first base. He's played both corner outfield spots, but most scouts believe he's going to translate best at first base at the next level. And he's had a bit of an up and down year, some really, really high highs and, some lows, more so of late. But if he's able to put his whole package together, it's a middle of the order, 30 home run type of bat. And, Ryan Clifford obviously acquired in the trade for Justin Verlander. That would be the prospect that I would keep my eye on. If Alonso is to go elsewhere down the road, Ryan Clifford could be a first base option.
Okay, so you mentioned Mark Vientos as well, so let's stick with him for a little bit. He's been playing a crucial role in the Mets offense and has been a huge part of their success in the second half of the season. Keith, what has been so special about Vientos' development this season?
I think it stems from his mentality at the beginning of the year when he was basically told you don't have a job because of JD Martinez, which was a gut punch. Then he came up and delivered a walk-off home run and was immediately sent down and kind of developed a little bit of, I guess you'd politely call it a chip on your shoulder, where it didn't matter what was going to happen next. He was just going to do him. And you need that as a young player to break in and feel comfortable. But this year we've seen him, because of that, he's just doing his thing. He has adjusted incredibly well to big league pitching. You can see it as games go on. He goes the other way when he needs to get his swing back, get his feel back. Offensively, he makes you salivate for what he could do over 162 games. I think as of last night, I read this on the air, his pace, home run pace, if what he did this year translated to 162, is 40 home runs. That, as we know, when we talk about Alonso, does not grow on trees. And he's held his own at third base. You have to give him credit. Metrically, he's not been great, but basically there hasn't been a game that's been decided by Mark Vientos' poor play. He's hung in there, and he has Francisco Lindor to his left, playing shortstop to help him along the way. Vientos has been probably one of the best stories amongst a team with a lot of good stories this year.
Yeah, it's really cool to see his growth in real time as well. Joe, for you, why has Vientos taken the leap to becoming a solid big leaguer player where we haven't seen that from other young guys in the minors?
I think he's gotten an opportunity, right? And that's, to Keith's point from just a minute ago, the last couple seasons, he would get called up and then he just wouldn't really play. He would just hang out on the bench and play on occasion. And a guy like Mark Vientos needs to be playing every single day. And he's now playing nearly every day. And one thing that he has made big strides on that were struggles a bit in some of the small sample the last couple of years is he struggled with velocity. When he was at the big league level, he would struggle with 95 plus mile an hour fastballs. That has changed in a big way this year, as you just see that fastball that he just took the right center in San Diego. So Mark Vientos is a guy that throughout his minor league career was a slow starter at every single level. And it's been nothing different at the major leagues, that he was a slow starter and he's figured it out. And, a guy that, coming into the season, you didn't know what his role was going to be, has now solidified himself as a part of this Mets core as you move forward.
Joe, are there any players that we can expect to see move to the big leagues down the stretch this season? What do you think?
At this point, and I won't put it into the air, something would have to transpire for, a Luis Angel Acuna or a Drew Gilbert to push for, getting called up in September. I think anything that's going to come back in September is things off the injured list, whether that's Kodai Senga, whether that's Christian Scott, who's been throwing off a mound. Dedniel Nunez is working his way back from, another bout of that forearm tightness. So if anyone's coming back, it's people off the injured list. And of course, Paul Blackburn will be back in the Toronto series. So that's really where any, quote, reinforcements will come from. I don't think at this point any prospects are going to be pushing their way onto the big league roster through the rest of the season.
Okay, great. Appreciate your insight on that, Joe. Thank you. All right, guys. It's clear that this season has been a very special one for the Mets. And on Wednesday, David Stearns said that this isn't a fluke. So, Joe, how do you think David Stearns views the season for the Mets, regardless of how they finish down the stretch?
Well, I think satisfactory, it's like exceed expectations, satisfactory, or did not meet expectations. This is what he expected. I mean, he's on record talking to Andy Martino back in spring training and all of the media availability that he did. He believed that this was a team that could contend for a playoff spot and play meaningful games in September. And we are here, September 5th. The Mets are clearly a playoff contender, half a game out of the third wildcard spot, and playing very meaningful games in September. So I would say he's probably feeling satisfactory, but I don't know David Stearns. I imagine he's a competitor that wants more than just being satisfactory. But I would say for his first season and the expectations, externally coming into the season, I imagine he feels satisfied that what he thought has played out the way he expected it to.
Yeah, Keith, for you, at this point, would you consider the Mets making the playoffs a win for the organization, or would you be disappointed if they don't make a deep run?
Well, I think, again, it all goes back to how we thought this was going to go down versus how it is actually going down. And we thought maybe a couple games over 500, the way the NL's been shaken out last few years, see if we can sneak in 4 games over. The Mets are 12 games over 500, and they're a half game out. As this season has asked for more and more from the National League, where you've seen the top of the wild card separate from the bottom, the Mets have kind of followed right along. This season is a huge win, in my opinion, for what's happened now. But I get the chance to talk to Carlos Mendoza every single day for our manager show for our radio broadcasts. And he keeps saying, as good as this is, we haven't done anything yet. And that to me is the sound of somebody that's super competitive, that David Stearns hired to put in that clubhouse to push when a push is needed. And that's what Carlos kind of said. And that's where the clubhouse is. They're 12 games over and they feel like they haven't done enough. So getting in for all of us, what a win. For them, they want more. And you can't ask for anything better if you're a fan.
Yeah, you've got to love playing for a guy like Carlos Mendoza as well. All right, guys, let's look ahead just a little bit. The Mets play the Reds and the Blue Jays before their next off day. They're currently a half game behind the Braves and 3 games behind the Diamondbacks, 3.5 behind the Padres in the NL wildcard race. So, Joe, which team between the Braves, Diamondbacks, or Padres will be easier for the Mets to catch for the final NL wildcard spot?
Well, I'm a math guy. They're the closest to the Braves, so that would be the easiest team to catch. But I think when you look across the schedules coming up for, all the teams that are still remaining in the race, the Diamondbacks have a tough go of it for the rest of the season. And they're dealt with injuries to Ketel Marte and Lourdes Gurriel. I know they just got Christian Walker back, but they're going through it a bit on the injury front, as Atlanta has all year. And it's, a credit to Brian Snitker and the players on that team, because, losing the likes of Ronald Acuna and Spencer Strider and Austin Riley and still being in a playoff spot just shows, the way that team is put together. But ultimately, the team that's the closest to you is Atlanta, and you got 3 games left against them. That feels like the team that they have the target on their back, and the Mets are going for it.
Right. And so, Keith, for you, do you think the Mets will have to essentially win every game to catch these teams, or do you expect any of these teams to slip up at all?
Yeah, I mean, truly, the Mets schedule, too, is not easy. I mean, you have 7 games with the Phillies left, and the Phillies are trying to be that team after an amazing start and a weak summer to finish strong in September. They just took a big series from Atlanta, so they're getting hot. and you have 3 at their place, 4 at Citi Field. Those are tough. The Mets get in, they're going to earn it. And I'm kind of with Joe, is that you want to probably leap that first team before you think about leaping everybody else. But I get the question of who may fall. I'm still blown away at how the Braves are hanging in there. They pitch really, really well. They have Chris Sale, who's probably maybe going to win the Cy Young. And that pitching staff is keeping that team afloat. They don't have Acuna. Albies is hurt. Riley probably done for the regular season. And we look up at the scoreboard. The Mets are winning. The Braves are winning every night. I mean, how much longer can this last? And like Joe said, maybe this 3-game set in Atlanta will avenge the 3-game set in 2022 where the Mets needed to win one. This is going to have that same last week of the season feel. So the Mets will be able to maybe control their own destiny if they get to that point.
Yeah, every game matters at this point in the year. All right, guys, as we wrap up this episode of Mets Off Day Live, how do you both plan on spending the rest of your off day? Joe, I'll start with you.
So football starts tonight, so I will be watching the Chiefs-Ravens game. I'm going to get some wings. And before the football game, though, staying true to what I and Keith both love, minor league baseball, I will be watching Jonah Tong make his AA debut tonight for the Binghamton Rumble Ponies. So that'll be at 6:30. I'll watch that. And then the football game will start at 8, and that'll be my off day.
That sounds like the perfect day. Keith, how about you? I will say, Keith, I was told that you are being honored by your hometown, which is incredible. So congratulations to you.
Thank you. I'm humbly slightly embarrassed by that, but it's very, very cool. I grew up in Valley Stream, South Shore, Nassau County, Long Island, and the mayor's a huge Mets fan. So he gathered a bunch of other people. There should be a good crowd tonight. I'm getting honored by my hometown, which if you asked me this a year ago or 10 years ago or ever, I would say never will happen, but we're going for it. We're just going to have fun, and hopefully I'll see so many people. It'll feel like my wedding day all over again, just around people I love.
I don't think my hometown knows I'm from my hometown. So that's That's great for you, Keith.
Well, I truly would love to just sit and watch football and eat your wings, Joe. But if I have to do this, I'll do this.
Touche, Joe. Well, Keith, congratulations once again. That's amazing. And I hope you both enjoy the rest of your off day. And thank you all for watching Mets Off Day Live presented by Planet Fitness. Join Planet Fitness for $1 down on the Classic membership. The deal ends September 12th. For Joe and Keith, I am Chelsea Sherrod. Thank you so much for watching once again, and enjoy your off day.